come back. Wait, no, I'm gonna stay. I'm gonna stay. I don't think I'll stay up. Oh yeah, somebody's gonna hold this camera. I'm trying not to hold the camera, but what the hell? I hold the camera. How you guys doing? I hope things are going well. This is Shirley Husar, and you're watching Shirley's World. I want to come to you because I'm coming to you with a 5-part series, not one, but two, but 5-part series. Hey, Michael, Mr. Cooper, thank you so much for your excellent commentary. You always come on my page. You always make really great comments, and it really, really means a lot to me. So I want to thank you so much. I want to thank you guys so much for your support and your love and your continual likes because it makes a world of difference. So I was trying to steady my camera, but I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this. So bear with me one second. This is an introduction video, and that ain't gonna work. That ain't gonna work. I'm gonna have to hold the damn thing. You know, I hate holding these stand phones, but I was trying to make it stand up. It stood up if it was the other way, but it ain't gonna be the other way. So you guys see me like this. All right, so let me cut to the chase. I'm going to end up talking about the ADOS and reparations. Recently, I was attacked on my Facebook page by the conservative movement regarding reparations because there is such, I will almost use the word hostile, because of the hostility of the fact that if you're conservative and you believe in reparations, something's wrong with you. There's no clarification of reparations. So I'm going to do a 5-part series. I'm not going to talk about it all tonight, but what I am going to do is have a conversation with many of you out there asking me the question, Shirley, why, especially some of my conservative friends, or why do you think African Americans deserve reparations? Another thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to also talk about the ADOS, because many of the ADOS, I'm checking out my camera on YouTube, see how the view is. So bear with me. Can you guys, hopefully you can hear me. Hold on a second. Let me turn the volume off on here, but hopefully you can see me here. Okay. Still not as clear as I like. All right, hopefully you guys can hear me because you're still on, so that's a good thing. And Michael said hi back, so I know Michael's can hear me. Michael, can you let me know if you can hear me? Can you guys hear me talk? I just don't want to be like doing this video and nobody can hear me. So if someone in line can tell me, say, hey, Shirley, we can hear you. It's great. You sound great. We don't hear you. It helps me know. So can you, yes or no? Give me thumbs up if you can hear me. Let's see if I can hear myself. Okay, yeah, okay. I can hear. All right. I'm going to continue on. Oh, thank you so much. Someone says yes. All right. So let's cut to the chase. The African American descendants of slaves. We're going to do a 5-part series where we're going to talk about the ADOS. We're also going to talk about reparations and the 400 years commencement of African Americans in this country. So in 1619, the War Dutchmen brought 20 Africans here as commodity trades, goods, and service. This year marks the 400-year anniversary of blacks in this country. African Americans who have made a difference in so many ways. 400 years later, we are now in 2019, and we are able to see what has come about it. Many people are claiming to be descendants of slaves. Many people say they are, they aren't. What's the purpose? How do you know? We're going to kind of iron out a lot of this. We're also going to be having an event. We're going to be having an event in Virginia Beach, Virginia, and I will be announcing the location and more information. But get your calendars opened. Write this down for August the 21st through the 25th. It is a signed commencement by the president, but there's told that possibly President Obama might even be there, and other dignitaries that will be there at this event. But mostly there'll be people like me and you to have a discussion about African American people and the value of our worth. So I started off telling you recently I was attacked on Facebook, social media, because of my stance on reparations and because of my stance as an African American woman wanting a betterment for her people. And in return, I got ostracized, I got criticized, I was told, you don't know what you're talking about, and it's funny how conservatives really love you when you talk about illegal immigration and when you talk about Trump or anything that they stand behind or wear the hat. But if you start talking about reparations or your own culture of people, no. You can't do that. So I can do whatever I want. I'm an African American woman who's a conservative Republican, and I have a right as an American citizen to speak my mind. And I want to encourage you all to speak your mind freely. This is an introduction video. I'm not going to go into detail about all the detailed events of the ADOS, but I'll at least tell you what it is. ADOS stands for African American Descendants of Slaves. And many people who are out there don't know what kind of Negro you are. So my question to you is, what kind of Negro are you? Hey, Joyce, I see you out there. Nika, how you doing? Thank you so much. I enjoy my energy. Hey. But I want to ask you a question. What kind of Negro are you? It's because conservatives are colorblind. Colorblind to what? You walk every day and you see that there are people, EHZ, Isa said that they're colorblind. You see people every day out there, all these different ethnic and culture and color, and you privately say things different than you do online. Or you'll say them online, but you won't say them in person. So we have selective hearing, and we have selective choice of what we want to have said to us and about us. Now, you also say, hey, there's no more slavery. Is there no more slavery? I mean, Michael, talk to me. Is there any more slavery? You know, we need to understand the American history in regards to African American slavery. We continue to talk about the now, but you have to think about the pain and the anguish to how do we get here? How do we get from 1776 of the American Revolutionary War, the people who helped build and develop the infrastructure of America through that war, and 1619 to the first 20 people that came through the colonies? How do we get to there to here? And I think that is one of the discussions I have. But I want to tell you that in America today, ignorance is bliss. Because there are too many people on social media that are out there trying to tell you what to think, and how to act on your feelings regarding the understanding of culture, race, and identifying where you stand in all of those diasporas. You also have to understand what type of African American, again, I'm speaking to the African American people, and I know everybody that watches my video who's not, but this is just a clarification of it because this year marks the 400th year of the anniversary of African American descendants of slaves. So our team at Urban Game Changers says, let's really try to have a conversation versus an attack, or people saying, you know, I'm better than you, you're better than me. I think you have to understand the worth of the African American people. There are multiple cultures of African people in America today, absolutely. But the standstill of the ADOS movement is stop ASAP. You know, it does not need to stop. The ADOS is real. And we're going to have that discussion throughout the 5-part series. The African American descendants of slaves were the first African Americans, or Africans, that were brought here. They were not immigrants. They were not illegal immigrants. They were brought here as commodity goods, trades, and service. Now, many of you Africans who have come to America, or you might be a 4th or 5th generation African who've come here to America after the emancipation of 1865, and you came here as a foreigner and an African who is an immigrant, you have this America needs to have its own clarity. So to push this movement or this understanding off to the side is a disrespect to the person who said that in the chat room, is a disrespect to the people like myself and the people whose ancestors who laid the foundation in this country. We talk about treating people as subhuman, devalued, not worthy. All these conversations that are out there of how Black people are being targeted and tracked and traced. This is something that we need to have a conversation about, because by not having a conversation about this, we are failing to understand who are these people, the African American descendants of slaves. How do you know if you're a descendant of slave? Well, one thing, many of us of slaves that are out there that are not knowing their own heritage. Do you know your own heritage? Because many people don't know their own worth. And it's important to know your own worth, what you bring to the table, where you stand. And if you don't know your own worth, then there's a bunch of confusion, and there's a bunch of people who are hating the African American descendants of slaves. Everybody wants to get the same from the foundation. Everybody thinks we're all the same. It's not all the same. There are constitutional laws, and there's also certain things that are in place that was because of the civil rights, and they were because of the African American descendants of slaves who laid that foundation, our ancestor, and it's done through lineage. So many of you guys need to look up ancestry.com. You need to look up legacytree.com. You need to understand where your placement is in American history. What is your family story? Is it important to know your family story? I think it is, because we live in a country now where there's so much culture moving to this country, so many different people, so many different, we say races, from different parts of the world wanting to be in America. And they want to say that they're the same as us. And I've talked about the loans of the Latino community and the benefits they've been able to achieve. The Chinese have been able to achieve. The Salvadorians, the Guadalajarans, people from Saudi Arabia. These are things through chain migration, things through EB2 and EB3 visas that these people are able to acquire. I look at that as reparations for them. But we're going to give you a breakdown series of these conversations of things going on. Let's see, I am an ADOS on both sides, conservative and Republican. Also, direct descendant of the runaway slaves. Okay, good for you. Now, see, how did you able to track that? That's the question. How are you able to track that? Thank you so much, yo sister, for the $2 and fake news dollar. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Larry, trillions, 21 trillion in debt in the world. Will money come from? Also, okay, so you're saying it's $21 million, and where does the money come from? And using the census bureaus or the census consents. Well, look at it this way. You have $30 billion going back to Mexico through remittance, and we don't even get any of that money. What is that about? Why is the fact that they're sending all this money from this country out of the country, we don't get that money either? If you're going to look at the African American descendants of slaves, those who can trace back their ancestors to 1619, or at least until 1865, again, having to do with the emancipation. If you can say, I can trace back to my ancestors back, I've been able to trace mine back to 1810. And for sure, 1854. And we're still clarifying that 1810 out there. If you're able to do that, then you're a descendant of slaves. But the descendant of slaves are much different than an immigrant or illegal immigrant or someone that basically has a green card or a visa. We are a different culture of people. He says, Shirley, get ready to lose friends. Well, I'm not trying to keep friends and friends on this show. I have a family that know who they are. My family are descendants of slaves, and they know that they are, and they appreciate that. So if we have a situation where people are not understanding that, that's your fault. You're an ignorant person who doesn't want to learn who the African American descendants of slaves. You person that probably doesn't want African American people to have anything. These people who are anti-descendants of slaves, we are all different diasporas of African descents. We have Brazilian Africans, you have Hispanic Africans, but the African Americans have their own story, have their own place in this country, and should have a discussion at the table. We should talk about the benefits and the repercussions of it. There are many blacks who are out there who don't even know that they are a descendant of slaves. And I hate to shock you, there are many white people who are out there who don't know that they also are a descendant of slaves, that they have slave ancestors. Back in, 1910 is when the Census Bureaus changed over. It used to be black and white and mulatto, okay? So mulatto means that you are either half black and half white. Or the slave master, he slept a lot with his slaves. So a lot of blacks have mulatto. But in 1610, we started seeing a shift to people who say they were mulatto to becoming white. So now a lot of people look back through their genealogy or Census Bureau or a Bible, or maybe they go back to military records. There's a lot of ways that they trace your inheritance or your culture, and they find out that sometimes they switched what they were. It's really a fascinating puzzle to know who you are, isn't it? But if you don't want to take the opportunity to know that, that's a failure on your part. But it's mostly a disrespect that I'm finding out on social media with a lot of the conservatives and non-conservatives and the anti-ADOS people. when we talk about the Pan-Africans, and they don't want to acknowledge the African-American descendants of slaves, the ground layers, the railroad, the developers, the architects, the scientists of Africans that have laid this country to where it is today. Because we have to go back to the colonists of why did they bring us here. This series will be able to talk about that. Michael says my roots lay in Mississippi's, and my great great grandparents were slaves in Mississippi 4 generations ago. Michael, let me ask you a question. How did you figure that out? How did you figure that out? For me, I went to Ancestry.com. I looked through some of my family records. I started pulling up names and birth certificates and death certificates. And in those certificates, they usually ask you who was that person's parents, and then we can get some of the correct spellings. Another thing that I did was I was able to, my mother, thank God, fortunately, she liked to collect bereavements. You know those little brochures you get when someone dies in your family? I don't know why, but she kept collecting those. Maybe she knew that it was important that I knew the history of my parents and my great parents. So my grandmother, I was able to, as you know, those bereavements that you tell that person's story, who their mother was and their grandmother, and I was able to piece myself together in that way. How many of you guys have really done that? Michael says reparations for ADOS material. Maternal sides must have roots in American slavery. American slavery, absolutely. So you must have roots in American slavery in order to be considered an African American descendant of slaves. And again, you will be surprised. The descendant of slaves are not all black. They're also white people as well. Many white people don't realize they got a Negro in a tree. Which is what they have, a Negro in a tree. Stuff Down says, sister, I had a conversation with multiple Africans today, and they all stated that they wanted the ADOS movement to stop as soon as possible. That's what you were saying. Okay, I'm looking at 2 screens. I didn't get to read. It goes so fast here. I skip words, and I apologize. I'll see if I can look at the bigger screen and answer these questions and read accordingly. Yeah, because see, everybody wants the benefits of the ADOS. Everybody wants to hey, we're all the same. We're not all the same. These rules and regulations that were written in this country regarding the Constitution were written for the colonists, but when it comes to the African American descendants of slaves and the citizenship rights, that was in place because of the slaves who were not considered as citizens. We were considered subhuman. No one valued our worth that we brought to the table. And so because of that, they treated us as animals. We were less than a horse. So over time, as you know, that subhuman, I think, still partly exists today, the way they treat us with the police department and how there's certain favoritism with redlining, with property. And we're going to kind of go into that in a series that I'm going to share with you. Again, this is a 5-part series. All I'm doing is introducing the opportunity of a conversation. This is what I'm asking for you to do, is to come in and look for the series. They may pop up. I'm going to try to finish the series for part 1. They will be pre-recorded. They will not be recorded live. Some series I will do one-on-one and live, but most of them will be pre-recorded so I can cut to the chase and have it thoroughly edited. I also will be editing certain videos from PBS and some of my own personal story of my own life that I'm willing to share so that you can see my point of view. As Americans, we have freedom of speech and we have the right to share our views and ideologies. But I think the funny part is that we have so many immigrants, especially African immigrants, that now they are attacking the African American descendants of slaves. Yeah, remember, many of those people come from those African tribes that sold us. And they don't want to remember that pain and that history. They don't even want to be accountable to it. They'll say, I didn't do anything. Okay, you didn't do anything, but come on, at least acknowledge the fact that our ancestors went through hell to have the benefits of where we are today, and you're able to reap the repercussions. You are able to benefit after and because of the African American descendants of slaves. And that is a real and true story. Michael says, ancestry, blood and sweat and tears ignited the economic American boom. Absolutely. Which attracted ungrateful immigrants worldwide. Ooh, that is so true. You hear what he's saying? That many of the immigrants are not appreciative. They don't understand our story. They don't want to know our story. They don't find us valid to even have a story. But what they don't understand is the benefits, as what Michael said, that they are able to obtain the rights the money that they're able to acquire through government funds and programs for minorities is because of the African Americans. We have a problem. We have a problem because there are government funding, listen to me, that many of us have been able to benefit off of that has been set aside for minorities. And they did not mean that for every person around the world to come here and benefit by saying they're a minority, because that marginalizes us. I talked about leverage. These people are leveraging off of African American people because of the citizenship rights, because of the African American descendants and how we laid the foundation, sweat and labor and death and blood to get us where we are today, to now we are here today where these people are able to get the repercussion of the Constitution, of the legislation, of the amendments that were specifically for African American descendants of slaves. But what has happened is because we don't speak out, we've always been a culture to open our arms to many of you people from other countries. We're the ones that even opened our arms to the Jewish community. When you look at what happened after the Holocaust, many Jews were pushed back, and then when they finally were able to come over here in mass groves, they came into the black community. Matter of fact, Einstein taught at a black university. You guys might want to look that one up. Einstein taught at a black university. So many other cultures outside of not only Africans, not outside of many of the immigrants that you see today, became prominent citizens in America and respected off of the backs of the African American descendant of slaves. So now we have this thing called the ADOS, like it's something new. How could it be new when it commenced back in 1619? ADOS has always been talked about. We do the paraphrase of short and hashtag ADOS, but African American descendants of slaves are talked about in many history books, many of our own personal lives, many of our ancestors, our grandparents, and our mothers. They would tell you, well, you were a child of slavery, or your grandmother was raped by the master. These are things that they weren't proud of, and they didn't really want to talk about too much. But I think the problem is by us not sharing our story is becoming vanished. It's not being respected across the board. Let me read some more of your comments. I'm reading on both sides because part of it is moving forward and some of it isn't. Let's see. Republican says, we match the boundaries. I'm going to try to read it from here. It's going to bounce in and out, so I'm going to give parts and friends. Okay, you said your grandfather, great-great-grandfather was in the military records where he escaped from South Carolina, and he was going to Canada when he heard Lincoln allowed free runaway slaves into the Union. Wow, that's amazing. So apparently your history, you're saying that your great-great-grandfather many people did flee to Canada, by the way. But when they knew that the Union and that the Patriots, the Republic, was going to rebel and the Civil War was going to commence and stop using black people as commodity and trades, because slavery was on the decline, but because of the cotton and the profit of cotton, they wanted to continue to increase their number of ownership of slaves. The interesting part of slavery and the descendants of slaves, which is any other slavery in history, nationwide, worldwide, American slavery was very unique, specifically the African Americans, because people talk about the Irish. The African American slaves' descendants, children, were automatic slaves when they were born. So they weren't born free, they were born a slave. So a slave who conceived a child was able to have a slave. So you could grow your plantation quite rapidly if you had women who were having children, because those children became the ownership of the property of the master, of the plantation owner. So a lot of people don't realize that out of all the cultures, in the Irish, that didn't happen. When they were born, they were freed. We were not freed. We were considered still commodity trades and goods and service even after our children were born. What do you think? This is a question that we all have to ask. We all keep thinking, when is Trump going to address more issues that we have on the table? And I'm going to go back what I continually say to many of you. You're not going to get anybody in any administration to do anything for you unless you tell them what you want. And I think that is what we're going to talk about August the 21st through the 25th. We need to tell this administration the needs and wants of our community versus taking whatever they give us. And for many years, that's what we've done. The Democratic Party continues to give us things like governmental programs and systems to keep us divided. We also see from the liberal progressive movement the emasculation of the black man and the torn part of the black family. They do not want to see black men and black families working together. They don't even want us to have businesses. What they want us to do is to continue to be dependent upon systematic systems in place by the government. But I think what we need to start having discussions is it was not always like that. Segregation was not always the best thing for American black people. Let me say this again. Segregation was not always the best thing for African American people, because when we segregated and we commune among other cultures, then we got divided economically and we stopped spending among each other. There's a documentary which I'm going to share with you later on through my part series of PBS talking about the boss, black businesses. You can see it right now on YouTube. Make sure you take time to watch that hour and 45-minute series of different black businesses, corporations, LLCs, venture capitalists of the past and today that exist, and that they understand that it's an economic shift that is going to have to take place within our own community to be a contribution, or I shouldn't use the word threat, or at least to awaken. That's the right word, to use the awaken this administration, any upcoming administrations, of the worth of the African American descendant of slaves. Brother Wolf, how you doing, my brother? He says, I am an ADOS citizen that was blessed to know 4 generations of my great-grandfather was born into slavery, and he explained his life to me when I was 6 years old. I think that is so awesome, Brother Wolf. That is so important that you were able to be blessed to hear the history of your people. I think many of us, unfortunately, don't have that story, and you need to tell story. We need to have these conversations, my brother, of your story and our story, my story, your story, because we have a country now where people don't commune and talk anymore. They just want to tell you you don't know my story, you don't know my life, my people. They're quick to tell you about their people, which I find evasive, because it's like, okay, so your people went through some trauma. Well, you don't understand. That's why we're all here. No, you're here for the infrastructural benefits of America. This is why immigrants are here, because of the infrastructural benefits of America: the free food, the free housing, the job opportunity, capitalism, the benefits that socialism gives you in this country, free reign as well. The problem with that is they don't assimilate, they don't associate. They isolate themselves, and they extract, write this down, they extract the good that we have in our country, and they do it in remittance, and they send it back to their country and their infrastructure to build their country better than ours. When we as African Americans were separated from our people of wealth, doctors, lawyers, teachers, the everyday layman, the everyday trade guy who did gardening and plumbing, they all lived in the same community. So we spend dollars within each other. Write that down. We spend dollars with each other. And by doing that, we protected, and we also gave opportunity to each other. So if we saw, let's say, George Brown down the street, son, hanging on the corner, boy, what you doing on the corner up here? Why you over here on that corner? Let me go get this boy up a job. And we would grab that child, and we would give that child a job and opportunity. But instead, now we have commingled and got out of our own quadrants, and we've spread away from each other. And we're divided on viewpoints, on ideology, and we don't buy from each other. We buy from the Koreans when we need hair. We buy from the Chinese when we need soul food, like in Lexington Market in Baltimore. Shout out to my Baltimore family. It's unfortunate. If you ever go to Baltimore, make sure you go to Lincoln Market. It's an old historical market where you see the Chinese and the Hispanics cook your food. Cook your soul food and your chicken wings and your greens and your fried chicken and all these things that are Southern cuisines and known for African American people to eat. We see black people buying from them. Why are we buying from ourselves? Why we're not doing the days of the 1900, early 1900s and mid 1900s where we were able to see African American who had businesses, people who had owned companies, products, everyday uses like soaps and everyday uses, clothing lines. We did all of that for ourselves within our own community, like in Black Wall Street. Now, we have America today where we have immigrants, and this is what the Pan African Stump Down. I'm going to answer, go back to Stump Down real quick. Thank you, Pam, for coming in. Pam says, you didn't tell me you're going live. Yeah, I'm live, girl. Thank you, Pam, for coming in. Going back to Stump Down. Stump Down, one thing that we talked about is that we have these Pan-Africans who don't want us to tell our story, but they are quick to tell you theirs. Those same Pan-Africans, just to let you know, set up their own quadrums here in California. Yes, that's right. The Ethiopians don't associate African Americans in Crenshaw. The Ethiopians have their own quadrums. There's a bunch of Somalians who have now gotten their area of California. So again, these people have created, I call them quadrums, a bad version of Epcot, where they are spending and creating dollars and space for their community. What's the problem with that? The problem is we are so open to go try their foods and enjoy their lifestyles and spend our dollars, but they are not spending dollars in our community. Why? Because we have a community. Crenshaw is being torn apart. It's been genocide. And this is one of the times that we need to start really, really speaking out. Who's outside? Brother Wolf. We need to demand immigration or remittance taxes return to the community. I agree with that. I said that earlier in one of my videos, the one previous to this. Make sure you guys go to Urban Game Changer, sign up, join. Make sure you follow me on Facebook, get your thumbs up and subscribe and share this video. Your video means a whole lot to me. Ted Hayes, God bless Ted Hayes. I've known Ted Hayes for decades. Rocket Man, he is a wonderful person. He's talked about reparations. He also supports it. I think that is great. You know, no matter what they may say, you talking about Trump 2020. I don't see a contender against Trump, so I think Trump's got a great shot of winning again, which is great because overall what he has done for African American people, he has pulled back the veil of the socialist movement and the devaluating of the emasculate of the black man and the black family, in the sense that the socialist agenda wanted to continue to convolute with the gays and the lesbians and all these inclusiveness jarble in the world today in our conversation. The African Americans have our own story. We have our own story, and we have the right to talk about that. And I think that is why we are open to see what's going to happen with this administration. But like I said earlier, if you don't tell them what we want, we're going to get whatever they give us. And that's the problem against that. Can Bernie win against Donald Trump? No. He's not going to win against Donald Trump. He's just not going to win against Donald Trump. Did you guys see that interview with Bernie and the Breakfast Club when they asked him, what piece of legislation have you signed any to help black people? And he didn't have any answer for that. How many times have I said, many of you who support Kamala want to be Black Harris? That's our state senator here in California. She's not done one piece of legislation. Remember, she's a prosecutor and attorney. One piece of legislation to help the black community. Not one. She likes to eat your greens and hang out, but she's not doing anything to better the lives of the African American people. And that's one of the biggest problems that I see out there. See who else has great questions out there. Okay, Sister EL says, since several thousands of blacks have been crossing the color lines each year, the phenomenon known as the pass for white, millions of whites are descendants of African Americans, are receiving African descendants, or white Americans have African descendants. Thank you. My phone cuts off. That is absolutely correct, sister. I said a little earlier, you might have heard me say this. Listen, many white people got Negro in them. They don't know it. And they're shocked, and they're go watch the series on Ancestry.com YouTube channel, Railroad Tides. Write that down. Stay here with me, but write down Railroad Tides and watch their series on blacks and whites. There's a white man in there. He found out he had black people on both sides of his parents, his mother's side and his black side. And they said that they were black, and then they called themselves mulatto, and up till 1910, and then they changed it to white. And so those people who passed, they were called black people who could pass. eventually start continuing to marry white, and that they didn't know that they had black ancestors. That's why that gene can pop up anytime. You don't know you got a Negro on your tree until you find out. You're like, okay, there you go. Again, if we say that the Democrats want to give reparations or a Republican give reparations, what does that mean? That is part of the informational series that I'll be sharing in my 5-part series. I'm not going to go all into that because that is a very broad statement to say we deserve reparations. Who deserves that? How should it be given? How should it be distributed? Why should it be distributed? Why don't I get it? I didn't make you a slave. I had nothing to do with it. Those are all these kind of interesting questions that are conversation that's out there that we need to discuss if you agree or disagree. But if we fast forward to 2020, excuse me, 2019 or 2020 election, we need to have an agenda. We need to have legislation that is going to work in our best interest. Because when you take a piece of legislation that says minority or benefits, such as contracts, governmental contracts for the minorities, people have always assumed that's for black people. Well, that word minority means everyone now, because we're floodgated with so many people wanting to come here and transport their lifestyle and take the benefits of the infrastructure of the American way. Thank you so much, Pam, for putting that link in there. It means enough. Pam, if you could also look up that link that's on PBS called The Black Boss Business. Another one I want you guys to watch. That's part of your homework, to watch those 2 videos. And see if I can move my hand slightly without dropping this phone. I have a book I want you to read. It's called The Captive Passage, right here. Can you guys see that book? Hold on. Let me put that right there. I want you to read this book because I believe this book can make a difference in helping you kind of understand Black history. So if you have a chance, pick this book up because it's a heavy book. It's pretty thick. And I will be talking about that. I'll be referencing pages out of that book. So your homework is to get that book, and your homework is to watch those particular videos because we're going to be discussing many things out of that series. There's another series called The American History. I'm going to show you a section where, Black people, when they traveled on the boats, many of them inherited smallpox. They got many diseases, and they built immune systems against it. Many times you found a lot of white people purposely during the Revolutionary War were dying of smallpox. And I want to show you how they had to end up cutting the blacks, taking their blood, purposely infecting themselves to make themselves immune. I mean, it's amazing how we were used in so many ways to keep the survival of the colonist. And that conversation's not talked about. If you are a colonist or a child of the colonist or a person that says, I had nothing to do with slavery, you have to think beyond slavery. You have to think beyond the fact that your ancestors were slaves or were not slaves. What the ADOS, the African American Descendants of Slaves, wants you to understand that we are a culture of people that laid and created the foundation for every other ethnic group to benefit off of. When it comes to the Constitution, of the amendments that are put in place that affect us today. And that conversation has to be laid on the table. You cannot deny what is going on. You cannot deny the fact that the African American descendants of slaves are under attack because we want to have this conversation with each other. Why is it that you guys want to attack us when you don't attack anyone else when they talk about their history? We are living in a time in America where every other person from different countries are moving here left and right, and they are quick to tell you their entire story. My baby, my life, my country, you don't understand. We were poor. We didn't have anything. Well, what makes you think Black people ain't poor and don't have nothing right now? What makes you think now that you're here, you're able to get governmental contracts and government grants, and you're able to get loans? Why is it you can get that and we can't get that? And if we decide to get that, then we're ostracized and put down because they say, well, you have a chance. You're born. You've got all the free things here. Well, that's not necessarily true. There were redlining. There were, Fair Housing Act, for example. In America, people who bought housing There were areas that black people who had the money wanted to buy on better sides of the town. They couldn't. For example, in California, Pasadena alone, the 210 freeway divided the north and the south. And most of the north side were owned by African American people. That's why a lot of you don't know, near the Rose Bowl where people walk around, those upper end homes, those were owned by black people because that was considered North Pasadena. South Pasadena was owned by a lot of white people. So there was a lot of redlining them saying, you can't have those blacks buy over here. But in the fair housing came into place in 1976, 1979, 1979. So many of you guys are living today in 1979. You are still fairly young. And you don't realize that discrimination of housing under your generation of birth came into commencement of protection. Isn't that interesting? I mean, oh my God, you'd think that this stuff is like back to 1619. No, 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 no. There were still laws that were in place that were detrimental of generational wealth, that were detrimental to generational wealth. So if they were detrimental to generational wealth, where does that lie today? That means that there were white people who were able to buy into areas and leverage that cash to do something for their grandchildren in the future, but blacks who could not. So even if they had equal amount of money allocated to them, let's say in the 60s or the 50s, they were not able to develop that money and liquidate it and captivate after the benefits of it because we were broken up as a community and we assimilated, but then we were purposely segregated. So in the future, you see blacks and then whites and everyone buying everywhere in Pasadena. But I just wanted to let you know that redlining and then steering. There was another law that was put into place, me being a real estate agent and a developer. There were laws in place, and that's one of the tests on the ethics board. They asked you about steering, and what steering was, they would say, okay, these black people coming in here, and you can't sell them here. And the owners would say, we're not going to sell to them. And so the agent would steer them away, take them into another part because they knew that the people in the community didn't want them there. Well, that's illegal now. That's illegal now. So anyway, that was something big back in the 70s and the 60s and even early 80s. Many of you guys don't even read your title reports. In the title reports, some of the old title reports, if you read them, they'll say, we don't sell the Negroes. We don't sell to Negroes. But you don't read all those 150-ass pages. You just sign. What they do is sometimes they leave those words still in there because they do what they call an amendment, which lays over that, and it not only erase, but it basically disavows what that meant and have some new meaning, but it basically has an amendment on top of that. This was not too long ago, in the 70s and the 60s, and now we're in 2019. And those people are still living today. I'm not talking about all the way back to 1619 or the 1800s. I'm talking about not too long ago. So here you have 2019 where the immigrants and the illegal immigrants come here. They don't know anything of that history. They don't know anything of that struggle. They don't know anything of the racism and the bias movements that were cast upon African Americans when it came to purchasing and investing. Now they're coming here with cash and droves. The Chinese are buying, the Armenians are buying, and they buy with their own economic platforms, and they're flooding our market financially to the point that it doesn't even matter what the value of the appraised value of the home is because they will out purchase somebody based on cash. Which I don't think that's right because it affects the American people being able to buy on the principle of cash or credit. But those people don't even realize the struggles that were laid prior to that, those redlining, those steering, the Fair Housing Act. Well, they wouldn't have been able to do any of that in the past. And a lot of that has to do with the African Americans today. Let me go back to answer some of these questions. Sister E, you are there. The terms white race or white people entering major European languages in the late 1700 centuries. I'm going to go through some of the colonists. In this book that I just showed you, it talks a lot about the colonists and their positioning in the colonists. Triple T said, hoping that they wake up online about the ADOS. I agree with you. Thank you so much, Triple T. And are flying out to understand the United education. You go, Shirley. They know we need to know more. You're growing. You got that right. And and that the facts of what the veterans and the African American veterans that have contributed to this country, I totally agree with you as well. Look, if we don't understand American history, which is inclusive to black people, we fail ourselves. Let me give you something to tell these immigrants and white people and all these people, something, we are all the same, or we have the same benefits as you do, are the same contribution. Let me say contribution. When people think they got the same contribution to the African American descendant of slaves, I say, let me ask you this question. Where is your museum? Where is your museum in Washington, D.C.? Where is your monument? We have Martin Luther King monument made after him. Where is your historical housing that goes back to the 1800s? Because we have Frederick Douglass, who has his house that is now a museum. You have Harriet Tubman. You have many African Americans. You have Frederick, who's that other? Mary Bethune-Cookman. Cookman College University. Mary Bethune-Cookman book building is still in existence today, and that's out there. Did you know there's historical artifacts, buildings, monuments, museums after African American descendants of slaves, not Pan-Africans? Okay? So stop down all the rest of the people out there who want to stop the ADOS movement. Honey, it's already embedded in marble and in the ground in Washington and nationwide, in Georgetown and Virginia and Florida and Chicago and Los Angeles and all through the South, because it was where the trade lines were. Hell, if you act like they don't exist, then you go over and come join us. Come join us August the 21st. I need you guys to write this down. August the 21st through the 25th, we will be in Virginia Beach, Virginia, Florida. And I'm not Florida, Virginia Beach, Virginia, not Florida, Virginia Beach. And we will be discussing and showing you places where you will see people who were enslaved and when they got off those ships and where they got impounded at, physically impounded. This is not a fable story. This is real story. This is real life. These are real people. These are real historical ancestors who existed and children and descendants who live today. The discussion has to commence because the value of our story is being disavowed. The story of what we gave to this country and what we continue to give is not being respected. And that bothers me. And that should bother you who are out there. But to try to call ourselves all inclusive when we're all the same, we're not. When you talk to an Orthodox Jew, they don't say we're all the same. When you talk to a person who's an Amish descent, they don't say that they're the same. When you talk to someone who's an immigrant, they don't say that they're the same, but you want me to say that to make you feel comfortable. I will not say that. And the same thing with the Africans who say, hey, we were all Africans. We need to work together with my African brothers and sisters. I have no understanding of Africa because I've never been there. And they said, well, you would do better if you go there. And I do plan on going there one day. But I think it's important that while you're here in my country, wouldn't you like to learn my history? Wouldn't you like to have an understanding of what my people went through? What my people value, what they bring to the table? Don't any of you guys feel that's important? I mean, put some thumbs up if you agree with me on that, because that's important too. Pam said, us too. I heard that, us too. Us too means a lot. Absolutely, Pam. Pam, I totally agree with you. Doris Smith said, thank you, Shirley, for the education of our people about the African-American descendant of slaves and reparations. You know, Doris, this is a 5-part series. This is just the introduction of a conversation I think that we need to clarify. I know, God bless Yvette Cornell and Tone Talks and many of us out there. Mr. Research has been out there talking about ADOS News. Make sure you guys follow Mr. Research. We all have brought a little bit of something different to the table on this perspective of the descendant of slaves. I want to give you historical facts and legislation in regard to law of my perspective of it. But we all have to understand there's a value to this conversation. There's a value to its execution of what commenced, and now there's a disvalue of how it's being taken away, and how we're not speaking out against how it's being taken away, and how we're giving it away. And many people say, oh, it's okay, don't worry, let it go, let it go. What does that mean, let it go? Go to someone of another culture and say to the Irish, well, just let it go. You know, forget about the Irish and the Catholic Church and all of that. Just let it go. You know, why should they let it go? They don't let it go. They have those conversations of how it affects their family and their lives. We should do the same. We should respect other people and understand who they are, what difference do they make, what do they bring to the table, what are you bringing to the table? Because I want to ask many of you, tell me, what kind of Negro are you? Do you know if you're a daughter of the revolution? Do you know if you're a daughter of the colonists? Look those things up, please. Please write down daughter of the revolution. Write down daughter of the colonists, sons of the revolution, and sons of the colonists. Understand American history of 1776. Understand Americans' commodity trades of human flesh. If you understand that, maybe you would have a little bit more respect. Maybe you understand, well, you weren't slave then. That shouldn't affect you now. But I don't have the benefits that many of you guys have been able to receive through inheritance. Again, the leverage that has been equated and given to you. Write down leverage, because many of you guys have things that have been leveraged against you, and it's just not fair. It really isn't. Triple T said, I'm helping him to see this and ain't simple matter of individual and making good choices. It says, I'm about not letting anyone bypass by skipping over international hate. I know there's a lot of people out there who have hate groups and don't want to accept the real truth. But, like the Bible says, the truth will make you free. Many people don't want to be made free. They like confusion. They like frustration, and they don't want a responsibility to the truth. Are you one of those people? Are you, listen to me right now, listen to me, think what I'm saying. Thank you so much for the thumbs up and sharing this video, because it really means a lot that you share this video. Post it on your social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and subscribe and tell your friends that we're going to be doing a 5-part series. But do these people really understand the pain and anguish of your historical background? Do they? Because many people don't, and they don't want to know, because there's a responsibility of truth. And the responsibility is, once you know, you're responsible for that knowledge. And you said, well, Shirley, what does it mean you're responsible for that knowledge? You're responsible because you can't play ignorant to the fact of this anguish of a culture of people that have been leveraged against, that have been suppressed, on top of they're not being able to move forward because there's governmental systems in place that allow other cultures to have a leverage up over us. And that is a problem. But if we, as African-American descendants of slaves, don't call these problems out, don't ask for our own personalized legislation to protect us as a protective class of people like the Indians are, and even the immigrants. Look what the Democrats are doing. Horrible. The Democrats are protecting immigrants over African Americans. The Democrats are helping the illegal immigrants be able to do things in this country, have more rights, have more benefits, making that issue a platform than the platform of good American people. People who are homeless right now, people who have mental illness right now, people who can't even benefit the jobs because the immigrants are taking the infrastructural money benefits that they are making here and sending it back to their country. That's what the Democrats want to do. So in 2020, no, they shouldn't win, and they don't have a contender because their platform is not about America. It's treasonous. These people are aiding and abetting other people from other country and not wanting to help the American people. If you like Trump or not, it doesn't matter. But I'm telling you, he is a president that believes in the Constitution and patriotism. But if we as African Americans don't tell this president or any administration before or after, like before or the predecessor or the ones in the future, of look, if you guys are going to help us, then, there needs to be something done. I really think we might have to end up going back to boycotting and protesting. And then you got to stop buying from these foreign people. We give them everything. We buy their clothes. We buy from the stores. We buy from their markets. They love your money, but they don't love you. They like what you do for them, but they don't want you. They don't want to live next to you. They don't live in your community. They only have businesses in your community. Doesn't that bother somebody? Did you see that video that Phil from the Vice show? Shout out to him. This is an old video. I think this happened like maybe 4 months ago. Of that black woman that went to that store and her son was playing around and the guy walked out and hit that black woman. And nobody was appalled by that. And then there was a side where one black man stood up and started protesting. The other side was black women who were told they can get a discount because he felt sorry for hitting her. I mean, really, that just really was just unacceptable to me, of how we as a people should have really united and started a protest right there at that Korean store and took that man out of that neighborhood. These people set up shops next to black existing hair shops over the past, and now they have become dominant and predominant and created their own town in California called Koreatown. Koreatown was built on the backs of black women's hair. I'm just saying. That's how I look at it. Now, you think about that one and you let me know. You let me know. Democrats are trying to vote from inmate. That's so true. The Democrats are just doing so many things that are just so unfair and unkind, and I really, really don't like that. And but they also are treasonous party because that party is really not thinking in the best interest of the American people. They're pushing the agenda of immigrants and making you say you should feel sorry, you should care, you should have more understanding. But what about understanding my pain and my anguish? That's the part that I want you to understand. Because here in California, these communities are growing up. Koreatown is beautiful near downtown LA. You should check it out. Look what Chinatown is doing. They even have a little El Salvadorian town. They literally have Taiwan town. Why are these people able to set up African American descendant slaves are being genocide? It's because we don't speak out against these issues and we don't put our money back into our own communities. But we can't because we don't have the communities. We don't recycle a dollar. Well, we can't because we don't have a place to recycle and we don't know where to buy. And if we do, will we be loyal to it and will be outbidded or discounted against? Will the Koreans come in and then they discount everything against us? And then what are we going to do? These discussions have to talk, but I believe you do have to boycott a lot of these things. And by boycotting these things, it can affect the black community. What else do you guys want to talk about? I also wanted to mention the fact the 400-year anniversary is a significant signal because many people said something about the 400th year is supposed to change the energy waves of who we are as African Americans. I don't know how true that is, but we will find that out. Oh, you're talking about the inmates don't contribute to society when they're locked up. Wait a minute, it disappeared. Let me read it from here. Sister E, how so? Inmates do not contribute to society when locked up. I do agree. This is what Pam said. This is what Pam is posted up here in response to Sister E. I do agree that they vote after, a time being here. So I do agree. I also think after so much time being locked up, they do have the right to vote. But inmates are targeted for free labor. You guys know that, right? So there are many African American men are locked up purposely because they have to get so much free labor. A lot of those men in prisons are working for free. They work for companies that get out there and build things on the backs of African American. Also, they did not change the laws in the Constitution that stated that if you go back to jail, you revert back to slavery. So any black man in jail is a slave in 2019. You look that one up. You tell me, how fair is that? I'm going to go back to Triple T said those people are not Democrats. Those are parties that try being Democrats because of the Clinton times. This is true. Many people have left the Democrat Party because of the Clinton administration with the 3 strikes you're out laws and many things that they put in place regarding the prison systems. The problem I have with this administration or with the Trump administration, they continue to talk about the prisons and the housings and abortion issues in the black community, which are an issue. I'm not saying that they're not, but let's talk about family and wealth and businesses and black businesses. That's why, Pam, did you have a chance to look up that link on YouTube? It's on the Boss PBS Black Businesses. I really want you guys to watch that video and learn about the different black businesses. Before Madam J.C. Walker, there was another black woman who had a hair business, which she worked for, and then she said, you know what, I can do this myself. And she became the first billionaire woman who happened to be black. So the first woman who was black in this country, woman who was black, who happens to be black, was a black woman, billionaire. And that's just phenomenal. Unfortunately, that generational wealth passed down didn't commence because look at where we are today. Look, in other cultures like the Jewish cultures, they have foundations, right? Why don't we as African American people have foundations that we can make a difference in our country? We can make a difference in our own community. We could set up things and loans. We can have our own banks and be able to lend to our own people because many times we can't lend to each other. But if you notice in Koreatown or if you go in parts of LA and Alhambra, the Asian community there, they have their own banks. And so they lend to their own people. So why don't we have that same opportunity? Well, it's not the opportunity that's not there, it's the leverage that they've been given so that they can have the leg up to be able to do it. If we had that same leverage, we could do the same thing. But unfortunately, we're dealing with a lot of different things going on that suppresses us of those rights. French too. Thank you, Shirley, for the ways you're describing the housing redlining of the 1950s, the 60s, the 70s, and 80s, a compile of subjects. Absolutely. Redlining is huge because if you realize wealth is through real estate, right? Guys, put your thumbs up if you agree with me. Put your thumbs up. I really appreciate your support here and sharing this video. Make sure that you follow me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Snapchat, and subscribe. But absolutely, redlining is a huge thing in America. And what it did, it displaced us in a way that we weren't able to create that generational wealth, meaning that your father or grandfather couldn't pass nothing down to you. They surviving. How many of y'all tired of just surviving and paying bills, doggone it? Aren't you sick of that? That's all we do is pay bills and survive. How many of us like to own 2 or 3 or 4 properties? Because in the South, I meet African American people who own land, who own houses with an S. But if you're in California, you're lucky to own one because we've been pushed out by all these immigrants. California is being used as a template to the future of the world. The reason why they gave Barack Obama a name, a street after him, I'm going to tell you the real truth, because this is the immigrant state. This is the state that supports immigration. They didn't do that stuff in Chicago. They doing it. They doing it in California. Like, well, thank God for Obama. He's doing great thing. And then they put it somewhere where there's a bunch of affluent African community. But the honest truth be known, there wasn't that many people at that damn celebration. Because many people are they up to game. They up to speed. That man didn't help black people. He helped illegals and gays. And y'all know the real truth of that man. That man helped illegals and he helped gays. You know, we talk about okay, Michael says the merchants of black neighborhoods between Figueroa and Hoover. The judge cast judgment on the daughter of European immigrants and back in. Oh yeah, there was a black girl who got shot in the back. Y'all remember that? And then that lady was able to take her money and go back to her country. Shot that little black girl in the back. She called her a bitch and walked away. And what ended up happening was that woman ended up saying, "We're gonna let her go off." I don't know if they ever arrested that lady or found that lady. These people get off left and right. As far as the Asian community coming in and we buy from them and they don't like how we act upon them or how we interact with them. So anyway, we've reached the top of the hour, and I want to thank you guys for supporting. I appreciate the numbers of people that were on. I hope that we can get more and have more conversations. I will have live shows, and I will also have recorded shows to understand the beginning to where we are now. And I'm going to do it as much as I can in a 5-part series because, Black history is 400 years and I ain't going to have 400 days to explain the 400 years. But what we can do is if you can write on your calendar, August the 21st through the 25th, it will be in Virginia Beach, Virginia. And we will be having the discussion of African-American descendants of slaves, the celebration of the commencement of descendants of slaves in America. There's going to be food. There's going to be amazing speakers. There's going to be music. There's going to be, we're going to have T-shirt giveaways. We're going to have conversations of legislation and governmental contracts that you are entitled to obtain, because a lot of things you guys are saying, I don't know how to get no government contract for my business. You don't always have to think about small business loans. You don't always have to think about LLCs. You can think about how do you make that LLC work for you? How do you know about those acquisition and mergers? Why are black businesses helping black businesses? Those are the conversations that we're going to have with critical thinking people. If you're there to talk about you hate Trump, if you're there to think I'm going to talk about some other conservative people out there, you know what I'm talking about, that people keep posting the thread, I won't mention their name. This is not the group to talk about that in. I want to talk to those critical thinking, intellectual people in my thread. I don't care if it's 10 people or 5 people or 20,000 people. I want to talk to people who really want to have an open mind discussion without attacking each other, without being rude, but at least can understand it's based on legislation, law, and history. And so that's very factual because some people can't handle the truth. Some people can't live with the reality of what has been put in place to work for us and put in place to work against us. What they want to do is say, well, I didn't do that. Well, we're not saying you. We're talking about government in itself. And there's still things in place right now that are not helping the African-American people move forward, but are working against us through immigration, illegal immigration, chain migration, and leveraging. The conversation will commence in the 5-part series, a breakdown of how those things are and where we are today. But the deep and the in-depthness of solutions will be talked about and developed and created and executed August the 21st through August the 25th in Virginia Beach, Virginia. I think we're going to have slots for 250 to 500 people, and that's going to be about it. If more come, great. If we get around that number, I think we'll all be pretty happy. We're going to have some great speakers. We haven't announced our speakers yet because they're going to be fabulous, and I want you guys to be really motivated. But I want you to come in the comment section after watching this video. Tell me what you're thinking. Tell me, what do you think about the ADOS? Do you think it's important that we talk about it? Is it too much talk, or should we move on? I want to know what you feel about that. And reparations, is there really an understanding of clarity? What does reparations mean? Because I've gotten so many different damn interpretations of reparations. So I really want to hear your version, because I'll share mine. I'm not sharing it in this video. I'm going to share it in my other videos, but it's coming soon. And I'm going to give you a breakdown at it. And I want you to tell me in the comment sections right now when this video is done, what do you feel about reparations? What do you feel about African American descendants of slaves? Do you feel it's right that we even have a commencement of remembrance of the 400 years of the descendants of slaves who came here in Virginia, Fort Monroe, Virginia in 1619? Do you think that we should even remember those people? Because those of us who are descendants believe that we should remember them. It is important that we remember and know who you are and what you are. Because if you don't know who you are, you don't know where you're going. If you don't know who you are, you do not know where you're going, because somebody is leading your ship and guiding your course. You need to know your course. And it ain't always about money. Look at the situation you're in and be proud of yourself. Shout out to my sister Sabrina, who has gone through hell and texted me. She's a good friend of mine, and she went through hell, and she's so proud. She always tells me, Shirley, I got a better job. Shirley, I got a better place to live. That girl didn't have nothing. She was almost living out of her car. Many of you guys might be watching me right now. You are living in tents and you are in your car. And I want to tell you, you can have hope. And don't be hopeless, and don't be discouraged, and don't be ashamed, and don't think about doing something horrible to yourself. Because there's many of us who are praying for you, and we don't have the money to pay and put you in places. But we do have the political fight. I don't want to think about the homeless black people who are in this cold weather. We do have the fight to try to make a difference for our people. And I want to encourage you guys to don't be so senseless when you step over these people and they're on the street, and you go get your Starbucks and you go and get your coffee and you get your everyday living and you pay your bills, because that could be your family member. That could be your cousin. That could be your uncle. You remember that. You remember that when you see those people, and you don't just say a prayer and pass them some money. You start thinking about how you can address your congressional leaders and your senators to change your local cities. And tell them that we need to stop having these people to be so looked upon as lesser than, because they're not lesser than people. That could have been you. You could be one or two paychecks away from being like those people. But if we as a people don't tell them what we want, we're going to get more and more of our own people pushed aside, impoverished and homeless, like the videos that you've seen where I interviewed that woman. She was 67 years old and homeless on the streets of LA, living in a tent. And her mind was already gone, talking about we got to help these illegals and help these immigrants. If you're so adamant about how you're here as a non-American citizen, go home and fix your country. Fix your people. Because we can only handle so much on our plate before we finally break. California is a broken state. It is a state that is treasonous. It is a state that does not respect this president or respect the United States or the Constitution. And it's a state that is plagued with diseases like hepatitis A and typhus and measles. And woe be unto the people who do not wake up unto that. So many of you are here, you might need to move out. So you think about that, but don't ever give up. Don't ever be hopeless. Don't ever think that you're not worthy to be at the seat at the table of a good life. You don't have to be a millionaire, but you deserve a clean and a fair life. And that life is only in place unless you make a decision in your mind to move forward through that. So anyway, thank you so much, Francis. Hang in there, girl. We're still fighting right now. I thank you so much. I appreciate that. Mike says homeless demographics are horrible, 40%. I've been told they're up to 80%. You know, before chain migration, it wasn't as bad. Chain migration has pushed us out, absolutely. William, thank you so much. Some ADOS say Malcolm X children are not entitled to it. You know, I don't know about their children, but I think it's based, just to let you know, William, it's based on legacy and lineage. If you go through Ancestry.com, if you go through many of the Census Bureaus, weddings, birth certificates, death certificates, and you can show historical facts of the history of the years of your ancestors, that is how you prove, and the way I look at it, in finding out if you are a descendant of slave. We will talk about that. We will also talk about how the slaves were brought here, how the colonists used us, and our contribution towards our infrastructure of America because of those descendants. It's important. And that goes back to 1776, of them originally being brought here. So thank you guys so much. Thank you for your love. Thank you so much for your thumbs up. Thank you for all the donors who gave money. Any money you give is great. It helps us move forward for our better cause. Please, again, write on your calendars August the 21st through the 25th, Virginia Beach, Virginia. And we will be also in Fort Monroe, Virginia, celebrating the commencement. I look forward to having you guys there, and I look forward to talking